This episode is part of the Transformational Podcast, Systems in Motion. If you want to learn more about the leverage points, please listen to the opening episode. Sophia reveals the secrets of proteins and gives an exciting lesson in nutritional science. You will be surprised what proteins can do for our health and our planet.
Today, I want to talk about sustaining health through sustainable protein sources. To start out, I want to answer the question of, what is protein? So protein is made up of amino acids. These are the building blocks of protein. Protein is vital for our overall body structures and functions. We need protein and its metabolites, but also energy from carbohydrates and fats. Protein is the only macronutrient that we cannot store in our body. Our body can synthesize most amino acids itself. However, 9 out of 20 amino acids are essential. This means that we can only source them through our diet. So how much protein do we need? The recommended dietary intake for protein is 0.8 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of body weight per day. On average, that makes 46 grams for women and 56 grams for men. However, needs do go up in certain cases like pregnancy or for endurance or strength athletes or for elderly people due to muscle wasting as they're aging. Data shows that the Western world consumes double the amount of recommended protein, and the vast majority of its intake stems from animal protein. So adequate amounts of protein intake, regardless of diet, is not an issue in the Western world, as data shows. So how does the protein quality of animal and plant protein differ? Animal protein sources have a very balanced amino acid profile. That's because you're basically eating muscle tissue. Of course, it's not the exact same as human tissue, but that explains the desirable amino acid profile and the availability of essential amino acids. On the other hand, in plant protein sources, there are foods that have great amino acid profiles, but for most foods, there are varying amounts of amino acids. Something to clarify here is that all plants contain all 9 essential amino acids in varying amounts. So depending on the food group, there are more of some and less of others. So key here is the combination of different plant sources to complete the intake of essential amino acids. The completion does not have to take place in every single meal. Our body is very smart in storing and combining what our diet provides to sustain an adequate protein synthesis. So as long as you eat a varied diet with an adequate calorie intake, you're very likely to not miss the recommended dietary intake for protein. Now, how does the protein source matter when it comes to sustaining health outcomes? It's important to point out that food comes in packages. So along with the protein that we're focusing on right now, there are other nutrients and food components that make our food food. I mean, you're not eating protein, but a steak, for example. And these food components are in part unique to the food groups we're talking about today. These ultimately bring along implications for our health, how our health is affected through their consumption. The system affected by this is our organism and its overall health. Big epidemiological studies such as the EPIC study, the Blue Zone study, or the Seventh-day Adventist study have found numerous correlations between animal protein consumption and type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, obesity, different cancer types, and premature death. That's quite a list, huh? And of course, correlation does not equal causation. However, repetitive correlation in big longitudinal cohort studies pointing to the same observations do implicate interesting leverage points that for the most part, we're in control of. For the time being, I'll describe 2 dynamics, one reinforcing loop and another balancing loop. These examples zoom in on how what we eat matters to our body. Before we get into leverage point 7, the reinforcing feedback loop, I'm going to give you a brief background on the function of insulin for our body. Our bodies are designed to live on sugar. In fact, it's the main source of energy for our brain. Insulin is produced by our pancreas. This hormone is the essential carrier to bring sugar from our bloodstream into our cells to use it as energy. Type 2 diabetes is a condition at which this metabolic process is malfunctioning. So, how does the meat make us sweet? When we eat meat, we're eating basically protein and saturated fats. Our insulin goes up, and this blocks the release of fat from our cells, and it allows the consumed fat to enter our cells. This causes great impairment on the cell's ability to respond to insulin. It's clogged up, so to say. This condition is known as insulin resistance. When sugar builds up in the bloodstream, it's having a difficult time to enter the cells. Therefore, the pancreas has to produce even more insulin, which further evokes the storage of fat into the cells. So the more animal protein we eat, the more this happens. A state of fat toxicity. Can you tell? We're in a vicious cycle. So it's not merely the insulin or sugar to blame, but it's also a question of how good our cells are able to metabolize it. High animal protein consumption increases the acidity of our blood. The pH levels of our blood bring us to leverage point number 8, balancing feedback loops. To balance the acidity in our bloodstream, our body has great buffering agents. Calcium, which it releases from our muscles and bone tissues. This, however, tips off another unwanted side effect, which are the negative effects on your bone density and health. But that's another story. I want to end this with good news. As we've heard before, plants contain all essential amino acids, and they bring along phytonutrients, fiber, and antioxidants. And you know what? These components are exclusively found in plants. Phytonutrients have been found to be capable of foiling cancer buildups, and fiber is inversely related with the risk of dying from cancer. Fiber can also soak up the bad cholesterol and saturated fat that comes along with eating animal foods. Cholesterol is exclusively found in animal foods. Can you see the connection to the type 2 diabetes loop we've been talking about before? On a personal note, fiber is a really king nutrient to focus on for our health, and no surprise, the Western world is lacking fiber in their diet big time. So instead of stressing about protein intake, start to stress about fiber. Anyhow, as you thought this can't get any better, it can. Your everyday food choices have an immense impact on the health of our planet. The FAO recommends a plant-based diet pattern for health promotion and planet protection. This diet will not only help you to be kinder to yourself, but simultaneously be kinder to the planet that enables life as we know it. How great is that? That taking this conscious choice means giving back as well. Choosing plants over animal products is one way to support the paradigm shift our world so desperately needs.
This episode was produced in cooperation with Meeet Studios.